Yep, we are back with the last session of the current review. It's Titi Tamsangatu from the Titi Hookup with Teboho Kotsi from the Answered podcast. We are on Central News, the current review. Tebza?
Yes, my brother.
You will lead this session for us, my brother.
Yes, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, we are back on, like my brother said, Mr. T. And it's quite simple. Today we're going to be interviewing somebody who's very interesting because we saw with the current political, I'm not going to say climate, I'm going to say the political family of South Africa. We have new kids on the block and we will be interviewing. We are joined by Mr. Songezo Zibi. He's the founder and leader of Rise Mzansi political party, which is a new political party. We saw that it launched a couple of days or weeks ago. And I've been quite seeing it on social media when I time, whereby I got to understand what is Rise Mzansi, and I got to actually engage with some of its new members, which were actually explaining to me what the whole purpose was all about. But quite interesting about it, the founder and leader of it, Mr. Zibi, he's from a corporate background. You know, he's been in various corporate industries, including Volkswagen SAIC, and he's also been he's a former editor of a Business Day, South Africa's top business and economic daily, as well as a notable tenure at Volkswagen SA, like I said, and also he's wrote 2 books, Raising the Bar and Hope and Renewal in South Africa, and Manifesto, a new version of South Africa. So he's quite a how can I put it, well-oiled machine when it comes to especially the corporate. But I'm quite curious with one thing. Welcome, Manante Zibi.
And thank you very much, Tebo.
And I'm gonna shoot straight to the point because I'm quite curious for it. Why Rise Mzansi and why venture into politics, especially in the current times?
So, thank you. So I didn't begin my life in corporate. So some people say I don't look it, but I voted in 94. So I was already around. And my political journey is very long. It's just that I took a detour, to once freedom was achieved and I finished my studies and I was lucky enough to work for large companies and get opportunities. But my political background is in Pan-Africanism and Black consciousness, by the way. So in the 90s, I was in the PAC initially. And then in the mid-90s, I joined AZAPO. And I was an AZASCO member and activist at PE Technical in the 1990s. So I'm not new to politics. I come from a very political family. In fact, the local ANC branch in my village is named after my uncle.
Interesting.
Interesting. In a way, it's a reconnection with my roots because I've always been very politically connected anyway, even during the years I was in corporate. But to be honest with you, the reason I decided to reconnect with politics and on a full-time basis is because our country is in trouble. We all complain and say, oh, but these guys don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're doing. They are this or that or that. But none of us want to then solve the problem. We want to talk about the problem, but we don't want to solve the problem. And since I was writing the book Manifesto, I've got lots of suggestions in there about how to change the country. Now, you can't influence anyone if you're telling them how to change the world, but you're not willing to change it yourself. You got to show commitment to your own ideas. And that is how, in the last couple of years, my decision to enter politics came about.
So, with so many problems that you are talking about that are inflicting South Africa, and many of which are political, why add more problems for South Africans who now have a bigger problem of choosing which political party to vote for, instead of yourself joining an existing political party?
So, by the way, the biggest, so South Africans don't vote, ne? Too many of them don't vote. I don't know if you know, but if you compare eligible voters in 2021, only 38% voted, ne? 62% did not vote. And the 62% that did not vote were not confused about which party to vote for. So they're so confused, they stayed at home. That's not the issue. I get the argument. The reason they're not voting is because they don't like what's on the table. And Rise Mzansi, although we announced it in April this year, we had actually been doing work since the beginning of last year. And we were focusing on two questions. Why are people not voting? And what would make them reconnect with politics? Rise Mzansi is an answer to those two questions. To be honest, we can talk about it, but that's the bottom line. And the things that people tell us and show us have very little to do with what a whole lot of us, including me as a former journalist, think it is. It's not any of the things that we think about, which shows that we don't understand actually voters. Certainly, I have not understood voters. I thought I did.
So what would be the key? Oh.
No, go ahead, Tibza.
So what would be the key priority in terms of what Rise Mzansi actually stands for? What are you guys planning to achieve with that?
So let us talk about, let's talk about what people say. So one of the things that come up more frequently, or one of the things we've realized is that politics is an exchange. It's a transaction. And you sort out your problem.
True.
And that's your question. Actually, people don't believe that anymore. They don't believe that anymore. You can promise all the golden things. They don't listen. They look at their phones and they get up and they leave. That's the bottom line. So it's not the thing to do. People want something that expresses their issues in the way in which they experience them. So let me give 3 examples very quickly. The number one problem in South, one of the top problems in South Africa is hunger. Now, how do we know that? Because when people say we want a job, we ask, why do you want a job? It should be obvious. People put food on the table. So when did you last eat? People tell you I last ate yesterday. And you're talking to someone at 3 p.m. They last the day before at lunchtime. Now that gives you an insight to identify the problem differently because you think differently about the problem. That's number one. Do you know what the most prevalent thing is for young people? Because jobs are obvious. It's mental health.
Okay.
People talk about suicide, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and all of these things about just the difficulties they face at home with lack of opportunity, with broken families, and so on. You can come with us to every meeting, every single meeting. Sometimes they sound like church revival meetings. Once people start testifying, man, it's wild. Now, I've given you just 2 examples. The reason these 2 examples are important is because political parties think they know. And so they express things in a way that voters don't relate to. And people decide, that's it. These guys don't understand me. They don't listen. I'm gone. So we're offering a politics that speaks to people in terms of the way they relate to issues. So let's go on to your question. At our convention, which was a policy conference, we had 6 themes. The top 2 things were family and community. Those people that you saw singing like they do in an ANC conference and had traveled from all over the country, there were 2 things fundamentally. How to make sure that families are healthy, safe, and thriving, and how to make sure that communities are healthy, safe, and thriving. Those are the 2 things that people worry about every day. It's either their kids, their brother, their sister, themselves, their neighbor, and so on. Everything else around politics needs to be built around those 2 things. And so there are the other 4. It's governance, because you need a politics that works for family and community. It is the economy. It is the 5th one is nation building, and the 6th one is climate change. So we've had 6 big topics that are the basis of our politics. And some people think, you guys, are you an NGO? We say, no, we're not. But look at the people. Look at the people. There's like 1,000 of them in this hall. So we understand something you don't. And I don't mean you, I mean when we're in conversation.
Yeah.
But how are you hearing, the message and the like your message, your core message to the rest of South Africa? Because I think being a new political party, you have a lot of work to do in order to be, to popularize the party, so that people can vote for it, and to convince them that you are the right political party to take the aspirations forward. How are you going to be able to achieve that? We have some millions, because that is expensive.
No, I wish you did. We're a political party because we have to register. We're not a political party, we're a movement. So let me tell you who else is in our ecosystem. We have a lot of the political parties that took part in the local elections at a local level. If you remember, there were these parties formed by independents, and so they're part of our ecosystem. That's one example. We have a lot of community level organizations in our organization. We even have national organizations. So at our convention, there were representatives of various organizations, including organizations you've probably never heard of. Ubunye Bama Hostela, 130,000 members nationally. Abahlali basemjondolo, the Amadiba Crisis Committee, the mining affected communities of South Africa, and so on. So we've built, and we are continuing to build a coalition of organizations that worry about the same issues. Now, you would think that's different. It's not. That's how the ANC wins. The reason they call themselves a movement is because of what they've done. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there is a reason why our name is Rise Mzansi. Do you know what our message is to people? It is that if we don't, so at the back of each t-shirt, Rise Mzansi t-shirt that you see over the last few months, is a quote by Hank Stewart. It is our time, it is our turn. If we do nothing, it will be. We tell people, this is your opportunity to create the change that you want. If you think there is a future where you simply vote for us and you stay at home, the change is not going to happen. We need to stand up together and get up and go and mobilize people and so on. And so our method of organizing is that we have organizers, volunteers, and supporters. We will have 1 million by March next year across all three. Before the convention, we were growing at about 12,000 a week. And that was before the convention. This week, it's at about 20,000 a week. And those are people who sign up to be part of this movement. So we are doing this, that in a way that upends even the way you guys are asking the question, which is, what are you going to do for me? Nope. We insist. This is not where we do things for you. This is where we do things together, because guess what? We are voters ourselves. We are fed up like you. If we don't all stand up, nothing happens.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
When you go onto the ballot paper and you see all those more than 23 political parties, most of them are male-dominated and they're male-led. But in terms of most political parties, they tend to say, hey, we'll do this for the youth and the women, but they end up not doing it. What makes your political party different, especially when it comes to issues of structure and women and youth in terms of the role that they play?
Yeah, so one of the things we set out to do from the onset is that we are not going to have leagues. So if you go on our website and you look at our leadership, the youngest member of the national leadership is 27 years old, is Lawrence Manak. He was vice president of equal education. He resigned to do this. I am 47 years old. I'm the third oldest person in our leadership team. The rest are younger than me, right? More than half are women. And so you can't say you want to create the change and you want young people to drive the change, but they're sitting in a corner there being a league. And they must come and make representations to the older people. Same with women. So our chair is a woman. Our vice chair is a woman. Our about 4 other members of our national leadership collective are women, and the majority of our leadership team is under the age of 40, for instance. So why would you have a league for that? But here's the point: if you even look at our social channels, you probably will realize that the guys who are on the ground for us are between the ages of 18 and 30. Because they are seeing themselves in the leadership. They are seeing their issues being ventilated by themselves, by people that look like them. Irfan was part of the Fees Must Fall movement. He's 27, right? He is head of the South African Youth Alliance, Progressive Youth Alliance, for instance. So we've put those people in the leadership because there are no youth issues in South Africa, to be honest with you. Unemployment affects the youth more, but one of the things people in communities will tell you that this business of saying we prioritize people under 35 is wrong, because people are mothers, they've got children and so on. They're still unemployed. And you tell them they're not going to get a job because they're over 35, right? So the youth is affected by the same issues affecting their parents, unfortunately, but they are best placed to lead.
Going back to convention, what was the content of the declaration of the convention? Like, what in the end, have you guys resolved that you are going to do for South Africa?
So what we've decided is not what we are going to do for South Africa. A transaction here with voters. We need to do this together. If we don't do this together, it does not happen. So that's really important. But a couple of things. The first is that we really said it, I'm paraphrasing all of this because the declaration is long. So the first is we need to take care of the basics. One of the things we've said is that every family needs to have 3 square meals a day. Millions of families don't have that privilege. You can focus and we can talk about it, 3, 4 different policy solutions towards that outcome, but you need to do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is we need to have political reforms that give more power to the people and take it away from political parties in particular. That means changing the electoral system. That means changing the powers of the government vis-a-vis powers of parliament and what MPs can demand. But ultimately, the people must be able to fire MPs and members of legislature when they are not performing in the middle of their term. Otherwise, the democracy does not work. So that's a second example. The third has got to do with managing the economy. And we are saying that governance is critical in arriving at an economy that works. You need a strong state. Every business is in a municipality. There's an Auditor General's report. What does it say? All the municipalities are in crisis. Now you want to talk clever economic policy when everything is collapsing at every locality. It doesn't work. So one of the things the declaration does is to link these things, to say you can't do one without the other. You need to manage the government properly. You need to have a proper governance system and manage government finances effectively so that you can invest it in proper economic outcomes for people and so on. So it takes that tone and that way of looking at things. And we can dig then into more detail. I'm happy to make a couple of examples in practicality, what it means.
So in terms of, you already mentioned the part how you stand to be different, especially from other political parties due to the, but how are you planning to recruit South Africans, especially professionals? Because in terms of what you just said, I can hear how the target market is young professionals that actually feel excluded from political. In terms of how are you planning to do that?
It's not. So one of the things, no. So by the way, 45% of our activists are unemployed. They're unemployed. They don't have a job. Our activists come from villages right across the country, from Limpopo, from Mpumalanga, Eastern Cape, and so on. Firstly, the second thing is that they tend to be from low-income communities, actually. So I think because of my professional background, there is a general assumption that that is the main target market. Professionals are really important. I'll tell you why they're important. They're important in the sense that the work of the government is very serious. We take it for granted. The most complex organization in any country is the government. There is nothing that comes near anywhere as close in importance and the kind of money that you're talking about as a government. You need the right people to do the work of the South African people. And in as far as professionals are concerned, we are saying, think about doing what we did. We left jobs in the corporate sector to do this because we care about the country. You need to step up too, because the poor have been fighting the struggles every day while we grow our careers. They're not new to this. You're the ones who need to come and join the poor people that have been struggling all along, because you've got the means, you've got the language, you've got the articulation of the issues. And so that's kind of how we in this movement. I mean, Ubunye Bama Hostela is for hotel dwellers. It's not a. I mean, sure, we had the BMF president at our business council at our convention. We had other organizations at our convention. Sure, but the message is come and join the people.
Now, with new political parties and the registration fee that IEC is asking for, we saw that majority of upcoming small parties, they struggle to put together that money. In terms of also fundraising also becomes a problem. How are you going to be different from that? Because I can see
we are not different. We are struggling. So let me tell you, after this conversation, do you know where I'm going? I'm going to a fundraising meeting. So it's hard, man, because when you don't have a track record, you have no seats in parliament. You are an unknown political entity. Like I would go to people to raise money and they say, which big shots are part of your thing? Now, a big shot is someone from the ANC, right? I say, okay, so what do you mean? So they mention Mcebisi, Jonas, and all of these people. And then I have to say, but the people already don't like these guys. Like, you want something new, but you want me to place Mcebisi, Jonas there. Like, you want to vote for Mcebisi because you're comfortable with him as part of the elites, but the people are like, this guy is part of this crowd that has messed up everything. And so struggle. That convention that we did, we wanted to have 1,000 delegates.
Okay.
We ended up with just over 700, between 750 and 800. We ended up at Constitutional Hill under a stretch tent because we can't afford Nasrec. That's the bottom line. So, but I must also be thankful to professionals, by the way, professionals and business people. Our very first donor was a guy who owns a famous restaurant in Soweto, in Orlando. I won't name him because he didn't want us to name him. Okay. But we've had, I must tell you, I get touched. People, we've got debit orders for 7,000 every month, 8,000. Some people give us 80,000. There's lots of those. People basically say, look, I can't join your thing. It will affect my career, but here's money. People arrange fundraising. There was a play in Joburg that was going to run for 3 weeks. The producers started the day before, and all the proceeds from the play, from that night's proceedings, they gave them to us. And these are young people, they're young entrepreneurs, professionals, and business people. So we are grateful, but man, I must tell you, fundraising is hard when you're new.
And given that you have already been registered with the IEC, and this whole year is a year you can use for campaigning towards the next year's elections. Yeah. Are you going to wait for next year's elections exclusively, or are you going to participate in any by-elections that may come up in local government? To test your perhaps.
No, by-elections we are unlikely to do, and I'll tell you a little bit about our organizing model. We are unlikely to do because they suck money you don't have. To be honest with you, we don't have money to fight by-elections. because you end up spending 500,000-600,000 on a by-election, right? I mean that's 10 meetings, that's 10 fundraising meetings for me to get that kind of money. So we can't do. But here's our organizing model. We already have now over 1,200 full-time organizers. Each organizer has about 100 volunteers minimum each. Okay. Each volunteer has a further 80 to 100 supporters that they work with, right? Our target is to get to 5,000 by the end of March next year, so that in April, man for man on the street, we can match the ANC with boots on the ground. And we encourage people to organize in their local structure. So what is our rate right now? It's 20,000 a week. That's a current rate now that we are acquiring supporters, right? Because you need to do mkhabulo, you talk to people. We don't have money for billboards. And in any case, billboards don't talk, they just stare at you. And so to get around this resourcing issue, we are putting boots on the ground. We are using social media and so
on. Interesting.
Debza, do you think like using the as an independent analyst, do you think this is achievable? Even your volunteers, the boots on the ground, are people who would do the work, but they would be hungry at the end of the day. They would want to eat, they would want to drink water, and so on. Is this achievable, Debza, in your perspective?
Well, based the fact that we based in Mzansi and anything is possible, it is possible due to the fact that I've seen most political parties, they do have volunteers that actually dedicate themselves and their times, because people have hope and people they choose political parties based on the hope that is being presented to them. And yeah, all of a sudden they got a couple of seats due to volunteers that actually have been doing that. But my biggest problem is political parties, after they acquire those seats, they tend to forget the volunteers that actually did the work.
In fact, you see, now you're getting to our politics, by the way. So it's not the volunteers that you forget as only, right? Do you know what they disappear from the community altogether? They disappear completely. Yeah. So this is the thing. This is why we are Rise Mzansi and we organize the way we do. So if, gentlemen, give yourselves just 30 minutes, go and look at our social media pages. What you will see is our activists solving some or other problem in the community continuously. We're doing that through to 2026, right? Because what turns people off politics is that you go there, you say, vote for me. When I get to parliament, I'll think of you and solve your problem. People hate that, right? What people want to see is presence. What people want to see is activism around issues that affect them. And so what do you see our guys doing? You see our guys fighting LGBTIQ struggles. You see our guys cleaning up communities. You see our guys fixing Gogo's houses with whatever they can find in the local community. On our WhatsApp groups, people are mobilizing for food, for hungry families and so on, and people donate and that kind of thing, right? You need to stay in the community. The reason when you look at our pictures, you always seeing people walking the streets, meeting people under trees, in sports fields and so on. Do that every day for years. So we don't think we're going to win the election next year, and it doesn't worry us. That's not our aim. We're aiming at 2029 because we know these guys. Once the election is over, they're gone. We're going to be there. And we will decimate them in 2026 because they always make the same mistake. After the election, they're gone. Next election, they come back. Next election, they're gone. We stay.
How many seats are you hoping for in the next year general elections? in the National Assembly?
I'll tell you what number is possible for us by way of votes. The number of seats depends on the formula and the turnout. On our organizing model, it is possible to get between 1.2 and 1.3 million votes. And I must tell you, when we go and recruit supporters, we know them by name. We've got their ID number. We've got their phone number. We know if they're registered. We talk to them every day. That is why you need all the volunteers and organizers, and they need to have their 100 plus people. It's not
let me test what you just said. Do you have people in the state?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yes, we people do. in the Free State.
In First, yeah, we do. Yeah.
In Mangaung.
Oh yes. In fact, our provincial convener is in Mangaung right now.
As a way to getting food in their stomachs. Is that a possibility? That some of the people have joined Rise Mzansi for that, for economic emancipation for themselves, that they may just get like any living, no matter how limited it is, from Rise Mzansi.
No, we get cases like that. I mean, for instance, I was in one of the provinces. I won't shame them. And one of the things I had to speak about is, guys, you can't be organizers and suppliers for the event. You can't do both, because it breaks the organization. Then people start fighting about why I didn't do the catering at the other event. And now you're fighting as the organizers. You are 100% correct. It's a daily struggle. It's a daily struggle. You've got to say to people, guys, you make a choice. Even when you recruit, people are going to be organizers. If somebody is joining because they were trying to get a tender in the municipality and so on, that one must be a supporter, not an organizer, because it's going to cause us problems. But that's a reality of South Africa. You're right, Thompson.
But how do we move away from them? That those are real struggles.
No, it's hard. It's really about just sometimes asking people to choose. I mean, we spent a whole hour in the meeting that I'm referring to. I was saying, I'm sorry, you've really got to choose. Otherwise, we have the same problems as the ANC is having, right? Which is people want a position so that they can supply the I mean, sometimes you get cases where you realize the guy who brought the taxis is a cousin of someone. So, gentlemen, I'll be honest with you, it's a constant struggle. I won't say we don't have that issue. It crops up from time to time. It's just about trying to deal with it all the time.
Mr. Zibi,
Yes.
Please explain this. We are warriors of freedom. We dare not and will not fall.
Yes.
What inspired that?
It's our definition of freedom.
Okay.
And so when we have meetings at community level, people describe freedom in this way. If you are afraid in your own home of crime, or being afraid of walking in your community during the day or at night, you are not free. If you don't have a job, you can't be free to build your life. You don't have the means to build your life, right? And so on. And so with Rise Mzansi, freedom is not actually the right to vote per se. Freedom is the opportunity to live the life that is possible for you. And that life is healthy and meaningful. So when I was saying that to those delegates, they understood it in that context, to say, we are our own warriors for this freedom that we want. And we will not rest and we will not fail in that mission, because it's about putting food on the table.
Talking about freedom and warriors, I'm thinking now about the conflict in Palestine and Israel. Yes. What is the Rise Mzansi stance or view, in that particular conflict?
I mean, there are two things. And the first one is the immediate, right? And by that, I mean, for people like us who are removed from a situation, we get into the weeds of the politics. But if you're a Palestinian and there are bombs falling on top of houses and so on every day, right? what is the number one thing that you want? You want the bombs to stop falling. It's a ceasefire. Because you can't sleep, you can't get food, you can't get water, you can't get medicine, and so on. So the first thing that we are calling for in that whole conflict is a ceasefire, so that there can be humanitarian assistance. There can also be space for peace talks to begin. Right? That's the first thing. And one of the things we've asked for is that the global leaders who are making all the threats about one or other thing and threatening to send weapons and so on. Their people are thousands of kilometers away. They're not affected, right? Ultimately, it's the people there. So that's the first thing. The second thing that will solve the issue, and we focus on what will solve the issue finally. What you need is an independent, fully sovereign Palestinian state. What do I mean by fully sovereign? If you're a Palestinian and you need to go somewhere, you need to get permission from the Israeli government to travel. That's not full sovereignty.
State, right?
That's not full sovereignty, right? You are a homeland, right? Or something like that. So ultimately, Israel's own security lies in a free Palestinian state that has got full sovereignty, that can be an independent neighbor with the state of Israel. Now, they might choose to have a relationship or not, but it is important to say, ultimately, that is the outcome. And if there are any peace negotiations, there can be no doubt that that is a minimum outcome that you should get out of that negotiation. Anything else is just politics, and it's not going to help, unfortunately. You'll still get more violence for decades to come.
So do you think that our government's response, to that conflict is a correct response?
Look, I think in as far as it expresses this position that I've taken, which is that you need a sovereign Palestinian state, it is. But where I got conflicted with the president, right? I think he said in the same breath, they want to mediate in the thing, okay? Now, that's inconsistent. Because when Ukraine and Russia were fighting, they said, we won't blame anyone because we want to mediate, right? Now you get here and you say you want to mediate at the same time. You're like, okay, dude, choose. Do you want to mediate or do you want to express your opinion and leave the mediation to others? So there is a sort of a confusion, but insofar as it calls for a sovereign Palestinian state living side by side with the sovereign state of Israel, and the two have got equal sovereignty, then that position is a correct position. And I think globally, that is acknowledged, save by a few people.
Yeah. And before we let you go, is there perhaps a message that you'd want to remain in the imagination of our viewers and most South Africans or all South Africans about Rise Mzansi and its message towards the elections?
It is this. If we don't stand up and fight for the change that we want, no political party is going to do that on its own. There is no future where we sit at home and we hope that a political professional acting on their own is going to solve the problem. For 30 years, we've done that. It has not worked. It is time for all of us to try and fight for the future we want. It's not just about voting. It's about organizing our friends, our family, our fellow colleagues at work when we're lucky enough to work. Now, obviously, I want those people to vote for Rise Mzansi. But you know what? If it's another political party, that's fine too in a democracy. But please don't just sit and tweet. That's not going to make the change. Do something. And that's what we're doing.
And
thank you very much, Mr. Zibi. Siyabulele kakhulu. You have you've also infused a sense of curiosity in me, like to go learn more about Rise Mzansi. Yeah, good luck with all your campaigns and your endeavors, and yeah, peace.
Tell me, before Mr. Zibi goes, here's the funny thing. of all my history, especially in the media industry, this is the first politician that I ever get to speak with without him mentioning other political parties or politicians, always focusing on his own agenda and addressing it. It's quite interesting. That's why I'm also curious now to actually say, I want to see what's going to happen now.
Yeah, thank you so much for noticing that. That's deliberate, by the way. You know, we've spent so much time complaining about political parties we don't like that we don't pay enough attention to what needs to be done. You know, that's why we're calling ourselves an alternative, not an opposition. So I'm glad you've noticed. We just never spend time on other political parties at all.
No, it's quite interesting, and all the best.
Thank you.
That was the current review with Mr. Songezo Zibi of Rise Mzansi. Tips from the Answered podcast.